Good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public that may be joining us via the webcast. I would like to welcome you all to this evening's Cabinet meeting here at Maidstone Town Hall today, Wednesday, 24th of January 24. Usual matters of housekeeping, no planned fire drills, so if we hear such a thing, please consider it to be real and follow the instructions of the Democratic Services Officer. I'll ask the usual courtesy of electronic devices being switched to their least intrusive mode. And I would also inquire as to whether anybody is intending on recording the event. Not that I seek to prevent you, just so that others would be aware. Nobody seems to be indicating. And to remind us all that the proceedings are in fact recorded by the council and will be available for playback on our YouTube channel. Please be mindful of using microphones throughout the meeting so everything is captured. I think that's all the bits to say. Straight into the agenda. Apologies for absence. We don't have any. We are a full house. Urgent items. There are urgent updates in relation to Archbishop's Palace. So for the sake of completeness, some of those are in yellow pages, so they're only available to those here this evening. There's two of those, and then there's the note from Overview and Scrutiny last evening, and a previous one from the Corporate Services Pack offering considerations and thoughts. So there's actually 4 additional pieces of paper. I'm pretty sure in saying that everybody participating this evening has an opportunity to read those and digest them, but if you do need any further time, let me know when we get to it. Notifications of visiting members. I spy, and if you would just be kind enough to announce it yourself at the microphone there. And we also have a visiting member online, which we'll follow up with in a second.
Good evening, Clive English here for items 17, 18 and 23.
Thank you. And visiting members online, Councillor Jeffrey?
Yes, Councillor Jeffrey. I'll stick to item 17 if I may.
Very good. I've made a note of that. Thank you. At 4, may I inquire if there are any disclosures by members or officers? No indications, none noted. Next question at 5, any disclosures of lobbying? I'm just trying to think if I've actually been lobbied on Archbishop's Palace. I think there's lots of talk of it, but I don't think I need to declare an actual lobbied position. No one else? No. At 6, consider if any items should be. So I have noted there are some yellow pages, and what I suggest is that we'll move forwards in part 1 and go into part 2 if it's necessary to refer to any of the yellow pages. But I suggest that we embark in an intention to be an open session. Is everybody content with that? Agreed? Can I ask you to give some consideration to the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of December? I myself wasn't present on that one, but may I ask, are there any issues of accuracy that anybody wishes to raise? No. If that is the case, can they be agreed as an accurate copy? Is that agreed? I shall duly sign them in accordance with your wishes. Presentation of petitions. There are no petitions. At 9, there are no questions from residents, and at 10, there are no questions from members. 11 and 12, no matters before us, or 13 or 14, no business, or 15, which then brings us to 16, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. It's quite a few pages this time. To remind ourselves, this is updated monthly. So we know that in the evolution of things, there are a few changes, and I'm led to believe that there are a couple of items that will be re-timetabled. But other than the, as read in the papers, does anybody have anything they really need to flag up on the forward plan? Nothing from officers to really highlight. So there will be a couple of re-timetabling items in that in the next publication, but for noting, is that noted? Thank you. And next we can come on to the River Medway Basin Task Force. Now, this is something that's had a bit of a journey through council, from motions at full council, referrals to PACs, member item requests. But cutting a long story short, culminates in a report that was requested by a member requested to be put to Cabinet. So I'm going to ask the officer, Karen Britton, if you would be kind, it's your report. Would you just give us the headlines of what you've put together and what your recommendations are to Cabinet, please?
So this River Medway Basin Task Force report, as Councillor Burton mentions, has come through various paths, but the last path was through Housing, Health and Environment Policy Advisory Committee on the 7th of September. Attached to the report is what was presented then. What was being asked for was a task force to be set up, which there's a number of aims which are set out in the report. Primarily, those can be split into two areas, one being related to water quality and water issues, and the other is relating to biodiversity issues, just as a summary of the broad areas of the request. Within the report, I've set out the various structures and organisations that exist. It's not an exhaustive list, but it gives the key organisations that have a statutory remit, and also some more which are more of a voluntary nature, which are already existing within the area and either have statutory duties to look after water quality and water related issues with the River Medway catchment, or carry out biodiversity related issues in this catchment area. So I've set all of those out in this report. I won't go into those in detail, but based on all of these, my recommendation is that a task force isn't set up, because there's a lot of organisations already doing this type of work, a lot of which had statutory duties to do so. But to ensure that we as Maidstone have representation on those existing groups and ensure that we input to the various strategies that they already operate within the area.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Members, anybody want to? Sorry, let me take visiting members first. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor English has given the floor to you. So would you like to address Cabinet as visiting member, please?
Thank you, members. So clearly officers have recommended that that not to set up a task force. I mean, that is a bit of a disappointment, I must say. Our rivers do need our help, and I'm speaking today because I want you to go against the officers' recommendations. What we have in place is currently not working, and this is our council's opportunity to do something different, and something, I mean, I dare I suggest it, fairly radical. At the end of the day, you know, if we don't do something different, and if nobody does anything different, nothing will change. And I recall Councillor English quoting Einstein's, if we keep doing the same thing and expecting something different, that's the very definition of madness. I think he said that last night. Always good to quote Clive. So I'm imploring you, please do something different. Let's give this a go. Let's see if we can get some traction with these various bodies that are not delivering what we need. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So be it. But let's at least give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor English, if you'd be kind enough to come to the speaker's table.
It's certainly true that the route that this motion took to get before Cabinet for a report was a circuitous one. It had more bends than the River Meander, but it got here. I'm somewhat disappointed that the officer's report was so negative. We had a substantial scrutiny, overview and scrutiny review, of which pretty much every stakeholder who has been quoted for reasons for not doing this actually said that we should be doing this. So it's quite interesting that the organisations that we talked to at great length, including the Upper Medway and Lower Medway internal drainage boards, which are mentioned here, actually said we should be going down the route of actually setting up a liaison body. A task force is a rather grandiose name for it, perhaps. I think it's disappointing. I would hope that that the Cabinet would reconsider, although I have no great expectations that you will. I would hope that you would. I will have to say that this is probably a proposal that will come back, because the organisations in the field that are actually doing this work want a closer working relationship and a more coordinated working relationship with the principal local authorities. Having said that, we do need to engage a bit more with some of the organisations we are already involved with, so that I don't dissent from that point of the report. There is more work that can be done in that area already. Some good work is being done, but I have to say that this is a general problem actually with a lot of our outside bodies, that members from the council represent the council on it, but there isn't a lot of coordinated feedback and liaison between the members of the council that serve on all those outside bodies and the council as a whole. So I don't think it's unique to this issue. And it was something we're probably going to have to address at some point, even if it's not in relation to this issue tonight, because we have members on a lot of outside bodies and they sit on those bodies and do a lot of good work, but the council doesn't really feel connected to that, and they're not connected to the council either in many cases. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So I had the first indication from Councillor Mrs. Russell, then Councillor Cooper, then Garton.
Thank you, Chair. I do remember discussing this at full council, and obviously it's here now. My concern is really that the report was supposed to provide information about the costs and benefits of setting up a River Medway Basin task force. But what I can't see within this documentation is what this would actually look like, or what the cost of it would be. And I know that obviously in protecting the environment is of absolute highest priority, but we do also need to consider the costs associated with all of our programs, everything we want to do in the round, being mindful that we're responsible for temporary accommodation, trying to get the affordable houses and the revenue budget and the waste. And I suppose what I'm really wanting is maybe a bit more detail on what that would actually look like, the costs involved in it, and maybe some more clarity on what actually this task force would do, because there are statutory responsibilities for the rivers and they don't lie with us. And I do remember that when Overview and Scrutiny invited people to come along when they were talking about this issue, the Environment Agency didn't turn up. So I'm just concerned that we I think it's extremely noble, and the thought behind it is extremely noble. I'm just craving more detail on what this would actually mean and the actual costs that would be associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On a similar vein to part of what Councillor Mrs. Russell said, I've yet to see any reason, let alone a compelling reason, why an added layer of bureaucracy would be of any benefit to us. If anything, I think it would be a detraction, because we would be duplicating work streams. There are outside agencies from this council who do not engage, and I'm not convinced that setting up a task force, which would ultimately come at the cost of taxpayers' money, would remedy that. However, I do think there is something positive to come out of all of this. It has brought the issue of the river to the forefront of our minds, and clearly there is more that we can do to encourage engagement, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that. But I would like to move that we take option 2 as per the recommendation in the papers, because I think that is the sensible way forwards. And clearly that could be reviewed at any point in the future, but I think it's the right thing for us to do at the moment, and keep an eye on things and ensure that we do is within our power to improve the environment around.
Thank you, and Councillor Garton.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second Councillor Cooper's proposal. The recommendation is that we have active representation into the existing groups and strategies which operate to manage the river and its basin. I think that is important. I cannot see the point of starting another talking shop just for the reason of having another talking shop, just because, as Councillor Jeffrey said, we need something radical. If we do something radical, it's not necessarily solving problems. So engaging with the existing organizations, I think, is the way forward. I, for example, accepted an invitation to the House of Commons next week with other district councils, where we will be talking to MPs how we have our relationship with the internal drainage board readjusted. So I will report back to Cabinet on that, obviously in due course. Doing things like that will get us much more mileage than starting another talking shop.
Thank you. For my own part, Councillor English, you'll probably be, I have reconsidered, but I come to the same conclusion, that the recommendation in front of us is the right one, and there is no merit in having another standard, but that has been arrived at by careful reconsideration of everything in front of us. I'm slightly offended by the inference, well, not offended, but I make the observation that if we don't change it, nothing's, all of the processes that are set out here, everything through to our local plan making review process, all makes a difference. And it's actually beholden on the 55 members of this council, soon to be 49, but those most actively, to actually drive that policy creation, that work, to get faster and bigger and better and more meaningful changes. So I do think that the recommendation in front of us is the right one. I am wondering if the mover and the seconder would tolerate a minor amendment, because we do take this seriously, and that would be that we would ask the relevant head of service, which I believe would be head of spatial planning, but whoever, to maintain a log of these engagements over the next 12 months, and that in 12 months' time, that be reviewed for efficacy. That if there is evidence that what we are saying here, we're going to put lots of effort into these relationships, and let's come back in 12 months' time, review the log of that and say, yep, or perhaps we have got to do something to it, but I believe this is the right action. So I look to the mover and seconder to see whether they would consider that amendment, and I think both indicating, so we're adding that a log of these activities be maintained and reported back in 12 months' time. So unless anybody did, Patrick Garton, did you want to speak again?
Yeah, just to say, Mr. Chairman, this is an excellent idea. This is just exactly what we need. We need to keep a log, a control, a sort of performance log of our engagement with other authorities if we actually achieve something. There's no point setting up another talking shop which just sits idle and just talks behind closed doors.
Good, because I think the accusation would be we're kicking it into the long grass. We're not. We're taking this very seriously, and we need to monitor and review that progress. Councillor Perry.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on something that Councillor Jeffrey said. It's not correct to say that nothing is being achieved or nothing is being done, because a lot of work is already being done by the drainage boards, the Upper Medway and the Lower Medway internal drainage boards, and that's expanding, and it's been playing a major role in, I think, what I would call improving the flows of the river and also the flood prevention, which is a critical issue. And that is happening. It's not a talk shop, it's actually happening. And I think we need to take account of that. I totally agree with and support the recommendation, but I just don't accept that nothing is being done. A lot is being done. Thank you.
If there are no further comments, then it's moved and seconded with the amendment to maintain the log. Those in favour, please. Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. We're at agenda item 18. So this, I think, again, is the follow-up of various strands of work. It relates to provision of wheeled bins. It's a policy review revision. Councillor Garton, would you like to kick us off on this? It's your portfolio.
Yes, members. We had a policy change, which was an operational decision as a consequence of our budget back in April. And beware of unintended consequences. Nobody foresaw that back in March, April, when we decided the budget. But all hell broke loose in summer. And so we had to have a look at our bin replacement policy. We noticed very quickly that charging for broken bins was an issue which caused a lot of grief with the community, and it was not efficient financially. The officers and cabinet sat together, reviewed the situation, and in September we reissued a temporary policy for bin replacements. This year is just the September policy with a few added extras. At the time, we never discussed communal bins because there was not an issue with communal bins. So we just included this in the policy. And the policy has a few operational steps about how to go about to get a replacement bin. Also lessons we learned over the last 3 months since September about the problems we have for allocating replaced bins to the right homes who actually needed them. So while there may be something to be desired in the procedure, I think these are operational questions, not strategic questions, and we made it clear to our managers that once the bin collection contract changes, managers should look to possibly ease that process or make it a little bit more simpler for residents. But On the whole, this review of policy received approval from all parties and compliments from all parties really at the PAC, at the Policy Advisory Committee. And so therefore I recommend the revised policy to the executive tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Visiting member, if you would like to address us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlike with the previous report, I'm delighted to be able to give my wholehearted support to this recommendation. I would slightly quibble with one remark Councillor Garton made. There were problems, there are problems with communal bins, but they are a completely different problem than what was flagged up with the issues with the standard wheelie bin collection in September. There have been and there are a huge variation in the quality of management companies in the town centre and other parts of the borough. There are those who operate their communal bins splendidly, and there are those who do not. I would say, representing High Street, that we have some of the best examples and some of the truly worst examples in the same ward. I am pleased to see the statement set out in very unequivocal terms on page 42 about the approach that will be taken to communal bin operation. I'm aware that the relevant department, ably led by the officer, Jen Stevens here, has already been very proactive in dealing with some of those, but I do welcome the very clear statement set out and urge the officers, not they probably need that much urging, to continue to act with as much resolution as possible with some of the people, some of whom are managing agents on behalf of other local authorities who do not seem to be able to manage their portfolio of bins properly. So I'd like to say, on the general issue of wheelie bins, congratulations to Councillor Garton for listening to the comments that have been made on all sides by councillors of all parties and none on the wider issue, and responding appropriately, not just in September, but to tweak the policy in the light of the operational matters that came to light following the initial relaunch, if you can call it that, back in September. Does show that although we disagree on a lot of things, like the last item, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty operational issues, we are able to move forward effectively. Thank you. Well, unless you don't adopt the recommendation, in which case I withdraw all of what I just said. Thank you.
Any other colleagues want to add or say anything? So, in which case I shall. You'll have heard me on more than one occasion say that I think something we're always a bit slow to do is to look at the cross-cutting issues and actually double check, particularly with regard to our biodiversity climate change commitments. And I do slightly disagree with the summary and the cross-cutting issues here, because that says there are no implications on biodiversity, which I disagree with, because I think the easier we make it for residents to have access to the bins and make it easy and a positive experience and encourage them, the better our achievements in those commitments will be. So, you know, perhaps the minute will note that we actually think this is more important than that cross-cutting assessment portrays. And I think we're doing the right thing and we're moving in the right direction here. Nothing's perfect. There's always room for continuous improvement, but I'm heartened by the approach we've taken with this. You know, we've learned from it. We've learned lessons, and I think we've not been slow to collaboratively make the changes that were necessary. So really happy to support it. I think you were moving per the recommendations, weren't you, Councillor Garton? I'd be delighted to second that. Has anybody else got any comments? That agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. We can make further progress to agenda item 19, Thousand Homes update. I think we're going to find that on page 47. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, this is predominantly your portfolio, but it's a huge one that we're all involved with. But may I put upon you to lead us into the item, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the second update of our Affordable Homes programme, which we started in February 2022. Positive progress continues to be made in terms of the following. The council now has 277 residential units in management, of which 29 are affordable. The council has created and established the new business and housing development team, which is performing well. The team has developed a strong pipeline of schemes totaling 605 homes, and further schemes will come forward for approval in 2024. This report sets out the current operating environment, detailing the various risks and opportunities. The report sets out how our overall strategy will flex in the short term to focus on the following areas. Land banking to secure more opportunities whilst the land market is relatively depressed. Partnership working to help the council de-risk larger sites. The report also states that the quantum of internal subsidy per affordable home built, the Housing Investment Fund, should remain unchanged. I'd just like to say that this has been through the pack last week. Very little no contention at all. Just one or two comments around concerns from councillors of, as often comes up, how affordable is affordable, and the concern that even at affordable rents, there are people that cannot afford those rents. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything to add to that from anyone? Any comments, any questions? Pretty straightforward. I mean, I think the emphasis is there are two parts to what we're being asked to note the update report, which Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid has taken us through there. And then secondly is the matter of giving approval to enter into this umbrella agreement with Homes England, which will be the overarching document for us to negotiate individual funding deals with. So are you moving per the papers or anything? Right, so the subtlety there is enter into the umbrella agreement, and then each funding opportunity will be negotiated on the appropriate terms for that opportunity. So we don't need the blanket word that it's always a default of this version or that version. So per the papers minus that last part of the sentence after the comma. So moved Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, seconded by Councillor Garton. No further comments. Just trying to see if there was anything. I was going to say something about the overall commitment and the risks and the capital involved, but let's save that for the capital discussion. So as moved, those in favour, please. Unanimous, that's carried. Thank you. Okay. And lo and behold, agenda item 20 is medium-term financial strategy, the capital programme. Councillor Perry, the finance is your bag. Perhaps you would give us some introduction of wisdom to get us going, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This has been through the PAC, CS PAC, and it's also had a good discussion at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee last night, in fact. And I'm hopefully I'm not jumping the gun, but to say that I think in general it was the paper before you was very much supported. It isn't quite a lot of detail in it, but I'm just wanted to just emphasize a few particular points. First of all, it's a little bit in two sections. It is a program, so the capital program over what is probably be a 10-year period is subject to various controls. Apart from the basic due diligence, you've got planning issues, you've got the internal rates of return, the whole capital investment appraisal process. So it is subject to all of that, and of course can move. It is a slight movable feast, I think. But the position for 24-25 is extremely important because it sets the capital the interest payments that we require for our capital borrowing, and therefore the cost of capital is an important part of our revenue budget. So there is a strong link between the two. And that, of course, reads into setting the council tax, the basic precepts, etc. So there is this strong link. But nevertheless, I want to emphasize that it is a program that will be subject to further controls and process. And I think that is extremely important. You'll see in the recommendations, one other thing I want to say is that our whole strategy and our whole approach is linked and takes into account and respects the guidance, the Prudential Code guidance that is set out by CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounts. So that is something we adhere to very strongly as well. So I think it is the basis really of what I would call a very sound financial system that we have in our council, and something personally I'm very proud of, and I think it reflects very well on the officers as well who manage this system, because I think unlike many councils in this country, we do have a sound financial basis, and I think that's incredibly important. You'll see in the recommendations that are on page 161, there is an additional item, and this is to take into account the need to spend money, and a lot of it is on the biodiversity and climate change link as well, that spend money in Maidstone House and the link. So there's capital expenditure. I think it's about 3.5 million, but 2/3 of that should be recovered through grant, and it's essential that we get approval as quickly as we can so that we can get this grant. That is very important. That is, I think, set out in recommendation 5, which is on page 161 of the report. So I would like to move actually to approve this report and approve the recommendations as set out in page 161.
Just check with you on the item 5? I think you've highlighted that as a very significant spend. Am I right in saying that needs to become a key decision in its own right?
Yes, okay, yes, fine. Yes,
so
of course. Yes.
I'm just looking at that. So we're not taking 5 this evening because the governance system requires that to have scrutiny in its own with due notice of a key decision. So it's 1 to 4. But as Councillor Perry said, we need to crack on with that and make sure that those projects get a go ahead, but they need to be individually. Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, just to be a little bit procedurally geeky about that, the timescale may not allow all of the key decision notice. So it may need to have some sort of urgency support to get it through in time, but it must be identified in its own merit because it's a key decision, just for the sake of, did I get that geeky enough, Mr. O'Connell?
I'll do.
That'll do. Right. Okay. Thank you. Yes. So I following up to everything that Councillor Perry said, and I'm probably going to say exactly what he has said in a slightly different way. These are pretty massive capital ambitions. And I think when you look at examples of other councils around the country, this can sometimes be the undoing of them. So we, as a council collectively, Councillor Perry has identified that, whilst we're agreeing a framework for a capital budget here, these aren't actual go-ahead spending decisions of £400 million. They'll each go through their own reporting and due diligence and approval process. But I just wanted to underline to ourselves in capital letters, keep a really good eye on this. Don't let blind ambition be our undoing. We've got to take all of these decisions in a very level-headed, make sure that they can all be supported. There's external funding to be chased up and brought in to support this programme, which as yet may be unidentified. For example, a leisure centre ambition might be thoroughly supported by some external funding, who knows, but that's the kind of thing that we've got to be. So, being repetitive, but, big warning to ourselves, careful, careful, careful. And at the same time, keep the ambition. I don't think we really want to get into too much of the micro detail in some of the supporting explanations in the report, but I think I'm right in saying on 2.32 that St Faith's community bit is done, finished. So, actually those words don't need to appear there. And I was particularly interested in some of the next stage of investment into our medical campus innovation centre, the requirement for wet labs and stuff. So, I think don't take those words too literally, but there's more opportunity to bring in more exciting new businesses to the innovation centre if we reconfigure some of that, but it may not be precisely as is written there. So, Councillor Perry, you've moved per the papers recommendations 1 to 4. Anybody want to put that? Oh, you wanted to speak, didn't you, Councillor Cooper? Sorry, I did jump in there.
Thank you very much. I was going to second, so I still will second. I want to echo what you, Councillor Burton, have said. Really, there is a tremendously, some would call it ambitious, and I think it is ambitious, capital programme in there, which is not without risk. And normally I'm not the most risk-averse person, but it is very easy for us to sit here and play fast and loose with taxpayers' money. And as you correctly identified, when councils got the Swanee up and down the land, it tends to be because of some pretty dodgy capital investments. I don't think that I don't think there are many things in our capital programme actually which have the potential to do that. But we do have to remember that we are no longer in a position where we have negative real interest rates. The cost of money is more expensive. Capital investment by its very nature tends to be in particularly illiquid assets, and some aspects of a capital programme tend to be investing in depreciating assets. So, whilst I second, it is with a huge caveat that the council, the body of councillors and officers going forwards, keep a very close eye on the risks within our capital programme, and ensure that the risk appetite is reined in as much as is humanly possible. Because I would hate to see, in particular, the Thousand House programme be put in jeopardy because of other decisions. And that is essentially what could happen in the context of such a large capital programme, Councillor Burton. But it is something that's that I wouldn't say I worry about, but I know that we need to keep in the forefront of our minds for a long time. But I'm happy to second, and I so do.
Mrs. Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just a quick comment about the infrastructure delivery provision, actually, in the capital programme. I mean, lots of councillors talk a lot about infrastructure, and I was just really pleased to see that this had been identified, because if there are small viabilities, shortfalls that we've got, it means that we're not delaying the infrastructure that I think we and all of our residents want to see put in. So I just thought that was a very good welcome and addition to the capital programme. It's £1 million a year, and I think, if we can just close those short gaps and get the much needed infrastructure to Farrow Borough, that would be a really good thing.
Councillor Perry.
No, I just wanted to comment. I totally support what Councillor Cooper has just said as well. Actually, I think risk is incredibly important, and it's something that why we have built into our internal controls in the council, because we regularly review it at the audit committee. We regularly review it at other committees as well, and it comes in for a lot of scrutiny, and that is very important. It's an integral part of our internal audit function. And I think we keep a very strong watching brief on that. And I think that is very important, but it is integrally built into our internal controls. And that's a really good thing, if I may say so. Thank you.
I think you've said there something I was just going to say on the back of sort of summing up. I do think we have very good financial leadership here with the officer team at Maidstone. And, you know, it is a bedrock of helping us towards sound decisions. So acknowledge that and appreciate that. And if there are no further comments, may I ask that we go to the vote. Those in favour of recommendations 1 to 4? Unanimous, decided. Thank you. Okay. Quite a technical item next, I always think, and I'm quite intrigued that Councillor English wants to speak to this. Council tax base. Ah, did I write that down wrongly then? 23. I thought that was a bit. I was looking forward to something being interesting being said about council tax base. Not that it's not interesting, Mr. Green. Councillor Perry, again, just give us the headlines, would you?
This is in part of the process of establishing our council tax, and particularly related to Band D properties. It is formulaic, really, because this reflects the number of households in the borough, which has gone up a small amount, not unexpectedly, clearly. It takes into account surpluses and deficit from previous years, which you have to estimate, and we arrive at a figure. So the figure that you see here is detailed in the working paper, and it also goes down to parish level as well, where there are parishes that set their own precepts, because that is done individually for them. And again, the working paper has that attached. And so I would move that we support the recommendations, agree the recommendations in the working paper. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper speaking or seconding, one of the two.
Yep, on the basis that Mark Green is immeasurably superior than I am at operating a spreadsheet, I am delighted to second.
Well, I've checked it thoroughly and can find no errors. No. Moved, seconded. If there's no other comments, recommendations as per the papers, those in favour, please. Unanimous, carried, dealt with. Thank you very much. And so to item 22, Maidstone Leisure Centre. This relates to the renewal of the contract for that. Councillor Mrs. Russell, this is you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this is the report on the Maidstone Leisure Centre operator contract. So just a reminder that obviously we operate under Maidstone Leisure Trust, which is an independent not-for-profit community benefit society. By contracting with them, we have access to tax exemptions and various other benefits. So the contract extension is just a reminder, the continued operation of the Maidstone Leisure Centre, the Lock Meadow Health Club, the Moat Park Outdoor Activity Adventure Zone, and it is going for a contract extension. So we had extensive negotiations through 2023 for the extension to that contract. At the time that we had the October Communities, Leisure and Arts Policy Advisory Committee meeting, we hadn't reached a satisfactory position with Serco. So we did ask whether, if we continue to not reach a satisfactory conclusion, we could go out to tender to the market. Since that time, we've moved the negotiations, and thank you very much to the officers for their work on this further forward, and we've managed to get a final negotiated position, which we think is a good position. So you'll see on pages 204 to 205, that is some of the improvements that we made to the centre in the contract extension. And this is all from the minor practical improvements that was agreed on at the PAC and through Cabinet last year. So I hope you can understand by all of this that I'm saying, a long process, very diligently done. Here we are with the contract extension. So I'm hoping that Cabinet will be minded to agree the recommendations on the papers, which are on page 198. We've got 1 to 5. I just would like to add a 6th, which is that delegated authorities given to the head of legal partnership to negotiate, execute and complete all necessary agreements, deeds and documents arising from or ancillary to the decisions. If I have your permission to add that, and then I would propose as per the papers.
So that's moved 1 to 5 plus 6, the extra one there. For my part, I mean, I think we have seen this come backwards and forwards over the last weeks and months. And, you know, we've seen evidence of that negotiation, and, you know, the two parties have started in points A and point Z and come somewhere, you know, favourably to the position that we have in front of us. So I'm certainly satisfied that I think this is the right thing to be doing now, whilst the bigger picture is considered over the next year or two. I'm delighted to second any other comments. Councillor Perry, well, Councillor Perry, you may second it, of course. No other comments? No, just a rush of people ready to second.
Yeah, no, well, no, I was actually just going to just say this has been a long process, and I know a lot of work has gone into this, and well done, Claudine, and to the officers, because I know it hasn't always been easy, and at one point I did wonder if we would actually get to this point, so well done.
It's the right thing for where we are now, for sure. No further comments, so those in favour? Unanimous, that's agreed. Thank you very much. And now we move to item 23. This is the matter of the report for the Archbishop's Palace agreement for lease. Got all those additional update pages. You've got some bits of paper that are yellow, commercially confidential. If we need to refer to those in any detail, we will go into a part 2. But let's start open. It's you, Councillor Perry, isn't it? Yeah.
I'll start, and then we'll do what we did yesterday. I thought we'll work together on this one, if that's okay. So it is a double act. I've probably got the easy bit, actually. This is a long-standing thing. It's been going on for, I think, 4 years, actually, on and off. But it is one of Maidstone's most historic buildings. We've taken it over. We incur a lot of costs if we do nothing with it. We will be incurring a considerable amount of cost. And I think a building like this should be used, actually. It's part of our history, but I think it should be used. Now, we've made an initial attempt, I think we all realised with Balfour Hospitality, but they decided that it wasn't for them in the end. And so we've gone out to tender again, a very open tender, giving people the opportunity to come back. We haven't restricted it to a particular work, so I think it's been a very open procurement. We very detailed. A lot of work has gone into it. Officers have handled it very well. I think they've done their due diligence on it already, but it still could have more due diligence possibly. But it has been a very extensive process, and it's been whittled down to initially, I think, 3. It wasn't a huge number of applicants, but it came down to 3. 1 withdrew, so it came down to 2. The one that's in your paper is the one I think that ticks the boxes, and I think it is the one that is recommended, and I would certainly support that because I think it's the right approach. Questions have been raised about the company, and but I think they've all been answered, and you've got updates here as well, which I think cover the position very, very well. I think from financial point of view, it is over a long period, 35 years, but I think the net present value and internal rates of return are pretty good. I mean, it's always difficult predicting costs, but I think the investment appraisal looks pretty sound, I think. And I think it's the best proposal we have. If we don't do any, there are no other alternatives unless you went out to do the whole procurement process again, which I really don't think would be a terribly good idea. So this is what we've got on the table, and I'll hand over to Councillor Russell to take it on from there.
Okay. Yeah, I just really wanted to highlight that we did do an extensive public consultation. Over 2,000 responses came in from the public about what they would like to see done with the building. So top 3 options were wedding, seminar venue, mixed use culture and weddings, and a boutique hotel. So we hadn't narrowed the net in any way when we went out looking for options for the building. Like Councillor Perry said, full procurement was undertaken, and then we've got the option in front of us. It does have elements of public access, which I think are significantly improved from the level of public access that we were enjoying with KCC as tenants of the building. So that's a positive. I think obviously it's grade 1 listed, both the building and the setting. So there are things that will remain looked after and as is under the lease with the new, hopefully the new tenant. It went through one policy advisory committee, which recommended a couple of 4 items, which you can see on one of the white papers. And then it went through overview and scrutiny. They conducted pre-decision scrutiny, and there was only one more item that got added as a result of that overview and scrutiny, looking at the recommendations, which was number 5 on that second white paper. So maybe it's those that we need to discuss. The recommendations are as on page 210. With permission, I would like to alter recommendation number 3 a bit. So I'd like to change it to delegate authority to the head of legal partnership to negotiate and complete, and then a number 1 or I, necessary legal formalities for the agreement for lease, the lease and purchase of services set out above, and number 2, to negotiate, execute and complete all necessary agreements, deeds and documents arising from or ancillary to the decision. Nice and wordy there. But maybe what we should concentrate ourselves on is the recommendations that came forward from corporate services pack and then overview and screen.
What I'll suggest then is if visiting member would like to speak at this point, may well draw out some of those recommendations. And for clarity, are you going to speak as ward member or chairman of overview and scrutiny, or are you going to hybrid it?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman, as this is a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm the chairman of it, and I should therefore be here. It is not a major departure from the recommendations that we were presented with in the first place, although we did put one back in, which is I think the 4th one, and we did add a recommendation. I didn't quite catch, I'm afraid, what the cabinet member said little Roman numeral 2 actually was. So if you wouldn't mind, before I go on.
So if I can just say that that additional bit purely relates to us having the right wording to give the right authority to the head of legal to execute whatever we decide. So it was purely to negotiate, execute, complete all necessary agreements, deeds, documents arising from blah, blah.
I thought that would be the case, Mr. Chairman, but I thought it incumbent to check because I hadn't actually heard it. You'll forgive me for wanting to be careful about this, as this is one of the most important buildings in Maidstone and also one of the most difficult to deal with. One thing's for sure, that if we did nothing, it wouldn't be a case of doing nothing, because as it is a listed building, grade 1 listed building, the Borough Council would of course be liable for all repairs to ensure that it remained in a suitable state as a listed building. So in reality, doing nothing would not be doing nothing. We would be spending not just the maintenance cost on an ongoing basis, but the full cost of any major repairs. Now, I think it's fair to say that there has been some unease in certain parts of the council about the future of the Archbishop's Palace. When we got to the Policy Advisory Committee and Overview and Scrutiny, I don't think anyone was leaping up and down ecstatically about where we are. But let's be realistic. The alternative to going ahead with this proposal at this stage is going out to retendering again. And there is absolutely no reason to think that the retendering process for, I think, third to fourth time, would actually result in a distinctly different outcome. That's where my quote about Einstein came in last night, that repeating the same process and expecting a different outcome is a definition of madness. So as far as we can see, the questions that were raised both at Policy and Advisory Committee and at Scrutiny, and there were many of them, and it's right that there should be many of them, have been answered fully by the officers, or at least as fully as one can expect it at this stage in the process. The committee were mindful of the actions that officers have taken to deal with some of the issues. I won't refer to what they are because we'd need to go into part 2 then, but some of the issues that have come up, and to take what I believe to be the appropriate measures to deal with them. Now, you know, it still could end up with not being completed if due diligence or the negotiations do not result in the outcome that we want. But let us hope that this is a way forward for this building, because it is truly one of the historical, architectural and in parts landscape gems of Maidstone, and we have an opportunity here to actually improve things, because let's be honest, there wasn't a lot of public access when it was the registry office. People talk about maintaining public access, but actually the public access consisted of the 2 days that were actually in the National Heritage Days, so they were sort of double counting, and there wasn't a massive amount of public access. So this, if it were met, would actually be an improvement on the position we had when the county council were in the building. So that would be a gain for the public. So with all the caveats that one has, I do believe that this is the right course of action to take at the moment, and there do not seem to be any alternative courses of action that we could take, to be honest, other than saying, oh, we're going to operate this building ourselves. And frankly, I don't see a function within the council which we would operate it as. We're not in a position to directly run a service of this kind, unfortunately. So I believe that the recommendation is the right one at this stage, subject to what we find as a result of the negotiations.
Anybody else want to add to that? Councillor Cooper?
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. I have to say, given that the building, I was going to say sits empty, it doesn't. I think it is a fabulous municipal office for the parking services team at the moment. But notwithstanding that, there is a real temptation to act in a very hasty fashion, to cram a tenant in as quickly as possible. We mustn't do that. However, all of the information that I see in front of me would suggest that the proposed tenant is a very good tenant and has very good experience in this area. So I think moving this forward, and I hope that we can come to a formal agreement, ticks both boxes, that there will be a degree of public access, but certainly a very worthy use for the building. And it's an important consideration, although it might not be the most attractive argument, the cost of maintenance, that huge burden, does not fall upon the ratepayers in this borough going forwards. So I am absolutely delighted that we're in this position, and I really hope that we move forward and turn this into a worthy venue very quickly.
For my part, I've been trying to just sort of go through the very specific recommendations that came out of both committee scenarios. You know, unanimous support for the capital investment. That's very clear and straightforward. Support per the recommendations. Certainly, I think we've looked at the concept of whether there should be some separation of some of the property outside of the lease, but certainly what we've looked at, when you start to do that, the deal falls apart, quite frankly. You know, there is no scope. You know, these people are taking on the whole curtilage. I think it'll be well managed on that basis as one piece of estate. That makes very good sense. You know, there's a comment from the pack about viability. You know, this is a really difficult building to make work, and I think this is actually a really good outcome for the council. Sure, we'd like to be getting £250,000 a year, pure rent or something for it, big profit earner. It's not that scenario. If we've got a lively, vibrant use of the building, a good measure of public access, and you know, a private entity, I'm going to use word, taking the risk and the liability, I think it's a really good deal. So I'm really happy to support where we're at. To recap, is moved and seconded with the extra bit of words about the. So I think Councillor Mr. Rushing moved. Councillor Perry, I think you're seconding there. Just that we've got names attached to that with the extra words. Does anybody else want to add a final comment before we take a vote on this? I'm just looking to make sure that everybody's content and they know exactly what we are doing, which I think we are. Councillor Garton.
Just before we come to the vote, just to make something quite clear, are we using the wording as per page 210 then, where it says up to 1.5 million? Because the report from the scrutiny committee only mentions of 1.5 million. I would like to make sure that the up to is in the final draft.
I think if we can get any change out of that, we'll take it. I imagine it'll amount to the same thing almost, but yeah, it's a ceiling. We're giving it of 1.5. Yeah, clarity for everybody. In which case, may I move to the vote? Those in favour? That is unanimous. That's gone through. And that's us done for tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your contributions and deliberations. And I am pleased to close the meeting. Thank you.